worked nights at a hotel resort. It really wasn't a stressful job. I mean, most nights weren't busy. My job was rather boring. I got to sit in a small office inside a kitchen on the second floor and wait for room service orders. Most nights the phone was silent. If it was a steady night, I might get people ordering sandwiches every half hour or so, but that was pretty rare. It was usually just me alone in that office, reading a newspaper and counting down the minutes until my shift ended. To be honest, it was like getting paid to read, and I loved it. They paid me well, too. I got a shift premium for being on third, and on nights that I got orders, it usually meant good tips. It was a classy resort, and people staying there were pretty well off financially. You'd think people would be lined up around the block for this job, but that wasn't the case at all. The pay was great, and it wasn't stressful, but almost no one wanted to do it. I couldn't figure it out for the longest time, so I began to ask around. It seemed that the reason no one wanted the job was because no one wanted to be delivering food at night on the second floor for fear they'd encounter someone walking near room 209. I don't mean a drunk guest. I mean someone that shouldn't be there. An apparition. A ghost. A ghost. Yeah, right, I thought. I'd never seen or heard anything on that floor, and I'd been working that shift for over a year. But the dead serious look and tone that these employees gave me every time they spoke about it told me that they absolutely believed that this place was haunted. It was funny at first for me, but after a while, I began to dwell on it. It wasn't long before every little noise inside that kitchen made me jumpy. I'd be pushing a cart down the hall, and just hearing a door handle jiggle made my head whip around. This was stupid, I thought. I'm not going to let some stories get my imagination working up when I'm on the job. I hadn't seen anything, and if I hadn't asked around, I'd never even think about ghosts haunting the hotel. I put it completely out of my mind and never gave it another thought. That is until one day, when my girlfriend and I came home, and we saw all our cupboard doors and drawers open. I got the message loud and clear that night. We moved out after that. I also changed jobs. I wasn't taking any chances. One of the first houses I used to live in with my mom was an old farmhouse. It was me, my mom, my younger brother, and my younger sister. Being that I was the oldest, I got to have my own room, while my brother and sister shared a room. Being that it was a farmhouse, it was in a fairly rural area. The houses were all gapped pretty far apart to make room for farmland for each of the properties. The road was also a ways away from the house. Everything about it had an isolated feeling. At night, it was unusually quiet. I was used to hearing cars, buses, factories, and people all hours of the night. I really wasn't able to adjust to all this silence. It might seem like a dream come true to some, having your own room and living basically in the middle of nowhere, but for me, it drove me nuts. I couldn't sleep. I felt bored. I actually looked forward to school every morning just because there was noise and people. As soon as I got back home, the silence hit me and I absolutely hated it. It went on like this for a while. I don't remember how long, but it was for a while. However, at some point, after I'd gotten used to the house and the lack of noise, I began to notice something. Had we lived anywhere else, I probably would have been completely oblivious to it. But at some point, late at night in my room, as I lay there, I began to hear something odd. Something that didn't belong. Something I had not heard before inside the house at night. It was a rapping sound, kind of like a branch hitting a window, but it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the house. I can't say where exactly from inside the house it came from, but it was loud enough that I could hear it through my door. I spent weeks dismissing it. I thought it might be my mom or my little brother or sister knocking into something, or maybe it was a curtain rod that was loose and banging against a wall as the house settled. I had come up with dozens of possible explanations over the weeks. The noise by this point was happening almost every night. Finally, one night, my curiosity got the best of me, and I made a decision. The next time I heard it, I'd go out and I'd find the source. I didn't have to wait long before the noise started again, and when it did, I walked outside my room and I followed the sound. It was coming from a spare room that had a crawl space we used for storage. I opened the door, and there I saw it. It was a silhouette of someone standing near the crawl space. I thought it was my mom at first, but It became apparent pretty quickly that this was someone way larger than my mother. I don't know why I did it, but I called out to the figure. "Mom, is that you?" I felt my heart in my throat as the figure stood up and slowly turned its head. The face was old and wrinkled. The eyes were red, like hot coals. I never told my mom. We moved out of the house sometime later into a small apartment. I've believed in ghosts ever since. I was in my early teens at the time. I was in bed trying to fall asleep even though I wasn't particularly tired. My bedroom door had a sliding lock on it, kind of like the chains you see on some people's apartment doors that are supposed to prevent someone from forcing the door open when you have the door ajar. But instead of a chain, this was more of a bolt through an eyelet, but the function was essentially the same. My bedroom door didn't like to stay shut, probably due to its age. Because of this, my mom installed the sliding lock to help keep it closed. It also made for better privacy as I did have siblings. Anyone that's ever had their own room in a house full of siblings knows just how difficult it is to get any privacy in your own room. There was always someone walking in at the worst times. Anyway, on this night, as I lay in bed, I just remember staring into the hallway. My bed was against the wall and the headboard lined up with the door frame. If my bed was slid down just a couple more inches, it would have been blocking the door. That's how close it was. I slept on the end closest to the door so I could see if anyone was trying to get inside my room. Maybe it was just paranoia, or maybe I had read The Telltale Heart one too many times. But for whatever reason, that was the way I slept in my room. The opening in the door just inches from my head. I have no idea how long I lay there for, but I didn't doze off. I was wide awake and listening to the sounds of the house. My room was pitch black except for the thin sliver of light that was coming through the door jamb. It was at this moment of focus that I thought I could hear someone moving inside my room. It wasn't super loud or anything, but I could definitely hear movement. Now, I'll admit, I was a complete slob. You'd never mistake my bedroom for a shimmering palace of cleanliness. I mean, for all I knew, it could have easily been some overflowing trash in the bin falling onto the floor, or maybe a stack of laundry collapsing. It sounded kind of like that. It wasn't anything that should have made me nervous or frightened me. At least, it didn't immediately. I only started to get a chill when I realized that the sound was coming from my closet. Let me explain that my closet didn't have an actual door on it. My mom wanted to make the room look more open, so she took the door off. She replaced it with those saloon-style doors, the kind you see in those spaghetti western films. But other than that, it was wide open. It was a fairly big walk-in closet. I remember being able to hide in it as a kid. Even a full-grown adult could have hidden in there behind all the clothing hanging up. I probably shouldn't have ever let that idea enter my brain. There I was with my head turned, focusing on the light in the hall, while this rustling noise was continuing behind my head. I really wanted to ignore it and pretend it was all in my head, but all the while I'm trying to block it out, the louder and more obvious it became. The difference now being that it went from a shuffling noise in the closet to now being a crawling noise on my floor. I wanted to shut my eyes and force myself to sleep, while at the same time, I wanted to roll over and peek at whatever or whoever it was that was making the sound. I kept repeating over and over again in my head, "Just look. Turn your head and look." Just as I began to slowly turn off of my left side in an effort to look behind me, I could feel pressure against the side of the bed. You know the feeling, when you're in bed or laying on a couch and someone sits by you? It was that feeling. But now I wanted to scream. I was officially terrified. I could feel a cold, clammy sensation overtake me, and I began to shake violently. It might seem childish, but I wanted to call for my mom. I was that scared. And then I heard it. It was a voice. A man's voice. 5 words. 1 question. What are you afraid of? I screamed, jumped off the bed, flipped on the lights, and stood there sweating, cold, and dumbstruck. There was no one there. I cautiously crept toward the closet, reached my bone-white hand inside, and flipped the switch. Maybe it was the adrenaline taking over at this point, but I had finally summoned the nerve to slide the clothes over on the hangers and look inside. It was empty. I turned my head and stared at the bedroom door. The latch was still set. No way anyone could have gotten in or out without unlocking it. I slept downstairs on the couch that night, with the lights on and the TV. It would be another month before I'd ever sleep in my room again.